Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be updating my best underplayed champions list. So all of the champions on my list have over a 50% win rate right now. However, they're not picked very much. The highest pick rate out of all the champions on this list is 6%, and then all the other champions have below that. So I feel if you're playing one of these champions, you can actually do really well on them because the enemies, since these champions aren't picked very often, the enemies won't expect the damage that you're going to be able to put out. They won't know the champion's power spikes, and therefore, as long as you know how to play these champions correctly, you can definitely surprise your opponents in certain situations. So if you haven't tried one of these champions yet this patch, I would definitely recommend doing it. So with that being said, let's get into the video. So first up on my list is going to be VelKoz. I really like VelKoz because he's got a really strong early to mid game, and that I feel that this season champions that do have a stronger mid game and early game are the champions that are going to be able to carry the hardest, since games usually don't last upwards of 40 to 45 minutes anymore, and therefore playing the champions that can make a greater impact in the early game are going to be the stronger champions, and VelKoz is one of the better early game champions for sure. He's got really high base damages on all of his abilities, and therefore he can just do a lot of damage in early to mid game team fights. The amount of AoE damage that you can put out with VelKoz is pretty crazy, especially if you can get a fully channeled ultimate off in a team fight. It can just absolutely melt the opponents. He also does true damage, which is really nice for just shredding through the tanks, and he does have pretty solid CC as well with his Q and his E. All of his abilities are AoE as well, so he can just put out a ton of damage in team fights. He is also very long ranged, and he does have great wave clear as well with his W. He's got some of the best wave clear in the game for any mid laner, that's for sure. And in my opinion, he's got a really smooth auto attack animation too, which is, it may not seem like the biggest pro ever, but I think it's actually quite a big deal because it just allows you to CS really easily with VelKoz. And a few cons to him though is that he does not have a gap closer, so in the early game you do have to be careful about your positioning on him, and he also does not scale as well into the late game as some of the other mid laners, since he doesn't have very good AP scaling on his abilities. So next up I have Talon. I'm actually quite surprised that Talon has one of the lower pick rates this patch. I feel he's one of the strongest mid laners in the game right now because we're seeing a lot of immobile champions being played in the mid lane. Lux and Brand are two of the most picked mid laners, and Talon does a really good job against them. And then for AD carry, Miss Fortune is one of the most picked AD carries, and she's really immobile too. So Talon's just a really good pick right now due to the amount of immobile champions being played, and if you haven't tried him out this patch, I would definitely recommend doing it. He's got a really crazy strong 100-0. It's not very hard to use either. I feel that Talon is one of the easier AD assassins in the game because all you got to do with Talon is jump on your opponent, use your ultimate. As long as you hit your W on him, then you've basically just bursted the squishy target down, and you might have to add in an auto attack here or there, but his burst combo is fairly simple, and it's really strong once you do get to the mid to late game. The stealth that he has with his ultimate is also really nice because you can just sneak up on your opponents from behind and you can burst them down before they can even react most of the time. He also does have very good sticking power because of the slow he gets on his E as well as his W, and he's got a really short cooldown ultimate as well. It's on like a 30-second cooldown once you get to rank 3 on the ultimate, so that's really short, and you can just always use that to find picks, and you can use it to escape as well since it does give you some movement speed and it does give you the stealth. And he is also one of the better roaming champions in the game due to the gap closer on his E as well as the movement speed that he does get with his ultimate. And one con to Talon though is that he does have a bit of a weaker early game compared to some of the other mid laners in the game, so you just got to make sure that you survive the early game as Talon to enable yourself to have a good mid to late game. Next on my list is a jungler, and that champion is Warwick. So in my opinion, if you're just looking for an easier jungler, a jungler that doesn't take a lot of mechanical skill, or just someone who's not very hard to play, I would definitely recommend playing Warwick because his level 6 ganks are pretty foolproof. Unless you're a complete idiot, then you should be able to pick up a kill at level 6 when you gank with Warwick. His ultimate's like a 1.5 second suppress, and as long as your laners do follow up, 99% of the time you'll get a kill when you do gank at 6 with him. He's got a lot of damage as well with only building the Blade of the Ruined King as well as picking up the Sated Devour. I like to go those two items for damage on him, and then after that you just go full tank, and you can be really tanky while still dealing a ton of damage. The attack speed buff on his W is also really nice. It just allows him to clear the jungle faster, and it also buffs up his AD carry in teamfights, which is a really nice part of his kit. He does have really good sustain as well. I find myself not even buying any potions on Warwick when I play him. You really don't need to because his sustain in the jungle is just so good with his passive and with his Q. So I would just recommend picking up the Hunter's Machete and then not even buying any potions, because then you'll just get to your item even quicker. And he is also super hard to kill once you do get to late game as him, since he's just going to be healing for so much, especially if he does pick up a Spirit Visage. His Q is going to be healing him, his passive is going to be healing him, and if he gets Blade of the Ruined King, then he's going to be getting lifesteal as well. So it's just really hard to kill a Warwick once you do get to late game. One con to him though is that he does have very weak early game gank, since he really doesn't have any strong CC pre-6, or he doesn't have any CC pre-6, so his ganks in the early game are pretty weak. So if you're one of those players who prefers the early game junglers, Warwick may not be the best pick for you, but overall I do think that Warwick is a very strong pick for solo queue right now. Next on my list is Anivia. I feel that Anivia's got a lower pick rate because she just is a little bit harder to play than some of the other mid laners in the game. Her Q is a very slow moving projectile, and that's her stun, so if she can't land that, then her early game is definitely a little bit weaker than some of the other mid laners in the game. However, if she can land her Q in the early game, she can deal a ton of damage because her E is going to do that extra damage, and she can definitely surprise her opponents in the early game with that combo, with the amount of damage that it does do. She does have really good AoE damage though. Once you do get your ultimate and once you start team fighting, you're going to be able to put out a lot of damage in team fights. She does have pretty good kite as well with the slow that she does get from her ultimate as well as her wall. Her single target damage is really good too with her Q, her E, and her ultimate, and she's really hard to kill in the early game. I find that whenever I'm playing against Anivia, or when I am playing Anivia, the opponent always forgets that Anivia's got her egg in the early game, so what they'll do is they'll try to all in Anivia in the early game, they'll get really low, and then Anivia will just come back to life with her egg, and then she'll have the advantage in the laning phase. So I think that her egg is definitely one of the stronger parts of her kit, and it can definitely work in your advantage in certain situations. She does have also some of the best wave clear in the game, in my opinion, due to her ultimate as well as her Q. A few cons to her though is, like I touched on before, she is a little bit harder to play than some of the other mid laners in the game, and she also does not have a gap closer, so you do have to be careful about your positioning on her in the laning phase and in team fights. And to round out the top 5 for this video, I have Rammus. I feel that Rammus is one of the stronger junglers in the game right now for sure. He's a really good pick against any AD champion and all the immobile champions that are being played right now. We're seeing a lot of immobile mids being played like Lux and Brand. Misfortune is immobile, and she's one of the most played AD carries in the game right now. So Rammus is just a great pick against these meta champions. His pre-6 ganks are some of the best in the game as well. As long as his laners do follow up when he does gank pre-6, he should be able to at least burn the enemy's flash, since he's got the knock-up and the slow with his Q, and he's also got the taunt. And speaking of his taunt, once you do get to mid to late game team fights, his taunt is just so strong because it's going to be you're going to get it at 2.5 seconds once you get that maxed out. And let's say the enemies have someone like a Master Yi or a Rengar or somebody that just wants to jump to your back line and assassinate your AD carry. Well, Rammus can just taunt them, and then they're going to be completely useless. Most of the time, you're going to be able to burst them down before they even get out of the taunt. So I just feel that Rammus is a great pick right now due to a lot of these meta champions being really weak against Rammus. And he is a very good mobile champion. His Q provides a really nice speed boost, so he can just use that to gank really effectively and to get around the map quicker as well. A few cons to him though is that he is a little bit weaker if his team does fall behind, since he's an all-in champion. He wants to be engaging whenever he can, and if his team falls behind, then he's really not going to be able to do that. And he isn't the best against AP enemy comp, since he's not going to be able to build the armor that he wants to, and therefore he's not going to be able to deal as much damage as he could. So first up on the honorable mentions, I have Zac. Zac is a pretty good jungler. He doesn't have the damage that some of the other junglers in the game have, but his crowd control is pretty good, and his ganks pre-6 are some of the best in the game as well, since he's got the long range on his E. So if you are looking for a tankier jungler who's got pretty good crowd control, I would recommend playing Zac. Next on the honorable mentions, I have Skarner. I was really surprised when I saw that Skarner's pick rate is only at 1% right now. That's pretty crazy considering he was one of the most picked. He was like a picker ban jungler a few patches ago, and from him to go to that to like a 1% pick rate is pretty crazy. He's still a pretty good pick though in my opinion. He's got great CC with his ultimate as well as his E, and he does have pretty good damage once you do get to the mid to late game on him. So if you're just looking for an overall strong jungler, I would recommend playing Skarner. And to round out the honorable mentions for this video, I have Malzahar. So Malzahar has actually got one of the higher win rates for any champion in the game right now. He's a pretty simple to play mid laner. He's basically just got one goal in every single team fight, and that's just to use his ultimate on the high priority target. So if you're looking for an easier, pretty strong mid laner right now, I would recommend playing Malzahar. So that is all for the video, guys. If you did enjoy, then don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you in my next video.